Good morning, everybody. This is Suzanne in Ohio, and I had some projects to share with you today. But as I was thinking this through this morning, I thought I should say this is Suzanne in a mess. So if you see all the clutter and I'm groping about, that's what's all happening. I've been very busy. But this video is about my projects with coloring on fabric with crayon. In other words, tinted embroidery in this case, but it has some variations too. So if you're a stitcher, if you're a crafter, sewer, anything like that, you can take this idea and run with it. So I've been thrilled, actually quite enamored with this process, and I have several things going. But I have 4 things here completed, and I wanted to show you my projects. Plus, I'm going to go through the helpful hints and tell you some things about putting crayon on fabric that I have learned over the last several months. And I really do think I have it down to a fine art, at least for me. Okay, for starters, I'm working on, of course, fall designs, mostly for kits and patterns on my Etsy store. So that's what these are. These are my finished samples, and I want to show them to you. I just felt like they turned out so good. I hope you like them too. So let me see if I can, and the cameras, I don't know if it's going to adjust or not. Anyways, this was a design of mine, an old design that I had painted several years ago when I was, it was for a junk journal project. And so I got my image off my computer and I simplified it a little bit to make it, there I go. See, I told you I'm in a mess. I simplified it a little bit for the sake of embroidery, but it's still a complex design in a way. In a way, it's not. It's really only 4 or 5 elements: the pumpkin, 3 leaves, and the stem. And you can make it look as, what do I want to say, defined as you want by how many stitches you put on top of it. The pattern comes with the basic lines, and I'll tell you more about that in a minute. Here's the next project, and this was an old design of mine that I had painted on decor pillows, just throw pillows for the fall. So I redid it just slightly, and then I put it on more of a quilt setting. I boarded it off and put these 2 little applique acorns on each end. And all the color that you see in the background behind the stitching is crayon. So I showed this to a little group that I go to, and about to show it to my Quilt Guild group too. It is pretty amazing. So how about this one? All the color you see in the background is crayon, and it's just simply a blended technique, and I'll tell you more about how to do that. Actually, it's quite simple. It is quite simple. Now, this one is interesting because I also do a lot of fabric collage, and it's the same pattern as this one. See? Same pattern. This one is executed with crayon and embroidery, and this one is fabric appliqued. And I made myself laugh. I thought, well, it's a goose. I've got to have some flying geese. So flying geese, quilted border, that's my whole thing. And of course, they're all finished off traditionally like you would a quilt, and with the little hanging mechanisms here to put your stick in. And then just one little tack in the wall puts it where you want it, and it's easily removed or changed. So I'm going to set this one aside because that's a whole different genre of fabric collage, but just to tell you, it is raw edge and hand done. There's no real glue. I did not back each of these pieces with anything like Steam-A-Seam Light or anything like that. I used a little glue stick, school glue, Elmer school glue in a stick form, just to hold the pieces down long enough for me to get them uh, started or stitched. And then all the enhancement is done with embroidery. And you can see that there. I hope you can see it. All right, let's part with that one. And then let's go back to how would I start a project like this? So what happens is your kit, if you order a kit from me, your kit comes complete. I'm going to switch because the kit sample I have here is this one. Now I designed this one from a design I had done years ago with foam stamps, and it has more of a primitive type look, and I love that. I love primitive. However, it doesn't really go with my decor, but I know there's a lot of prim lovers out there, and I have a girlfriend that loves prim, and so I always try to make something for her. So this is the design, and if you would order this kit from me from my Etsy store, here's what you would get. You would get 3 pieces here, and the first piece is a high quality cotton, white, unless you specifically tell me you want it on a natural muslin. And I have already put the design on the fabric with a micron pen. Very fine lines. So you can choose to make them fine, make them thick, whatever you want to do. But they will hold up, all the lines will hold up as you color the fabric, because that's the first thing you're going to do is color your fabric. And so you get this, and what I do is layer it up for you just as a suggestion, because this is how I stitch. You do your own thing. But the piece of muslin, and then a piece of white flannel, because that acts like your batting, and yet it's not too thick, and then a stabilizer piece of a Pellon type fabric. And once you stitch through all of those, everything will pull down and puff up and look quilty, and also it holds your stitches on the surface proud so that your stitches don't disappear and don't sink. And I adhere to the Jennifer Clouston theory, and she's a worldwide expert on embroidery. She has 3 books in print, I believe. She never stitches on one layer of fabric. For one thing, it doesn't force your stitches to lay on the surface. They tend to sink in. It's floppy. It gets out of skew too fast, and it just has a more beautiful look if you have some kind of layering underneath. Depending on what I'm going to use the finished piece for, I might choose to just put a piece of muslin, a second piece of muslin back there. But definitely more than one layer and more than just fabric and Pellon, because I want somewhere to hide my stitches and my tie-offs in the back. And also, it gives you a place to travel your thread without it showing through to the front, or even your tails. If you're not careful, your tails will show back through that light-colored fabric. Okay, that's just helpful hint about that. So what else you will get in your kit, along with this, and let's see if I can find the correct one. Okay, all right. So what you will get is a picture, a print off of my finished item. That way you've got some color guidance if you want it. Only if you want it. Otherwise you can make that up as you go. and you will get a line drawing of exactly what I put on your fabric. That way you can make more than one, or you can put it in your computer and enlarge it or shrink it and then print it off as a copy, and then you could create different sizes. So that's what comes in the Etsy kit, and there'll be 3 new kits up on my Etsy site all by this evening because I've got to go to my Quilt Guild meeting today and see my favorite friends over there. So let me tell you how I go about this. And I have some sample practice pieces ready here. And I'm just going to show you basically what I do. So let's leave this in the corner to remind you where we're going with this, okay? Now, I had this is a fabric applique. It's enlarged. I did them years ago, copied them off and made greeting cards. And then the idea, the original fabric applique, I made it as a teacup, saucer, and just a bird. And then what I did was embroidery, all kinds of flowers down here around the base, like he's sitting amongst the flowers on the saucer. So I thought, well, I'll just recreate that little, hey, bear with me a second. I'm letting the camera down. I know I should have pre-thought of this, but since my Zoom feature will not work, you have to bear with me now. Remember, I'm just a little old country lady, and I don't know much about technology. Okay, so here's my design. We're going to recreate this little chickadee. Now, all I did was freehand sketch him on this fabric with my red pen. The frisson disappearing, heat disappearing, and as soon as I iron over it, it will disappear. The red lines will. And I won't need, I'm not really going to embroidery him, so I won't need the black. Well, maybe I will put the black lines on for you. At least some of them, just so you can see how the process is. So let's get, let's say we're going to define his head and at least his beak. And these would be, these black lines would be my embroidery lines. And let's just put his, the implication of his black back feathers right there. And then, because these areas all blend together, I won't mark them off except for right here on his throat. And then we'll come down around his belly. And that's about how I would do it. And these would be my suggested embroidery lines, and I can add any other embroidery in the center if I want to. Now, as far as the eye goes on a bird, I would put the position in there, but I wouldn't be too worried about defining it until that's my last step. All right, so let's say I have my design. You got your design in the mail. I had ironed it onto freezer paper before I colored it. If you're going to make a second or a third one from the design, you're going to need to iron your fabric onto freezer paper. I prefer washed fabric because it does have some sizing in it, and that sizing tends to resist the crayon. But I've done it the other way too, so don't let that stop you if you want to jump in and get started. But I ironed it onto the freezer paper, onto the shiny side, and I always iron on both sides. On this side, I turn it over and iron on the paper side, and that gives me a real good adhesion to that. So I'm all ready to go. So what do I have? What are my supplies? Well, I have a bunch of crayons. I've got another box. This is just the one I can show you here. And I have some off-brand. I used to think Crayola was the only way to go till I found a box of those, I don't know, some no-name brand at the thrift store. I thought, well, I'm going to try them. And I have found out they really have their use. So as you play around with it, don't discount any type of crayon. Now, what happens to our crayons after we use them? They get blunt, just like this. So you need to sharpen. Well, do not sharpen them with a pencil sharpener or a crayon sharpener, because you have all of those shavings which really become very static and jump all over the place, and you will inevitably end up with them on your fingers and hands and get them onto your project. So I sharpen my crayon on a piece of sandpaper and a coarse paper. This says 240 on the back of it, but that's the first one I grabbed. Get a coarse one, like a 50, an 80, 100, whatever. And then you just simply work your crayon and turning it slightly. You just simply work it across your sandpaper until you've created yourself a new point or the type of shape you need to work with. Because if it gets too blunt, you can't get into the corners. Okay, so, I thought one day, boy, I'm doing a lot of rubbing on this sandpaper. So I got the bright idea that I would heat up my sandpaper. And I have my little craft iron here, and I just simply hold it on my sandpaper for a minute. And you can't hurt the sandpaper at all. And as soon as that little part is warm, now it melted some crayon that was on there prior. As soon as my sandpaper is warm, then when I rub across it, oh my gosh, I can create a point in no time, because it's not only rubbing it off, it's melting it off. So my little point is so nice and will be easy to work with. So that's one helpful hint. Now, I watched a lot of tutorials online myself when I first started this project, and there is a theory out there that the first thing you need to do is color your entire surface with a white crayon. I didn't do that. I'm glad I didn't see that video before I did my first one. But then I went back and thought, well, I'll try that. And then the white crayon, I thought, man, isn't there an easier way? So I rubbed golf wax, canning wax, a piece of canning wax. You buy it in a box in the canning section of your grocery store. I heated up my fabric and I rubbed some wax across there. And then I began to think, what's the purpose of that? And it was so they could blend their colors and fill up the texture in the fabric, much like you would put some white gesso on a piece of canvas to smooth out the fibers in the canvas. I found out quickly that I didn't want to fill up the fibers. I wanted the fibers to help me with my texture. It doesn't always happen, because as you layer, and that is the process here, layering your colors. So let me show you this one too. I have sketched out quickly a little pumpkin here. Now, let me put some black lines on that so you can see what's happening, because that will come into play with this pumpkin, because I want to make a blue pumpkin. I love those teal blue pumpkins that are, been around now for about 10 years. And I'll just put some gentle black lines on here, and I'll show you what we'll do, because this is a bigger surface and you will understand the layering process a little bit better. So there's just a little bit of outline on my pumpkin. And again, the black lines will be my initial embroidery lines. So in my brain, the first thing I do is say, what's the basic underlying color of this bird? And I want to search for the lightest shade, or put the lightest layer I can. So his head and throat are black. Put him over here so you can see him. And The lightest shade of black, of course, would be a light gray. So I'm just going to, on cold fabric, I'm not going to warm it up yet, but that's what my iron is for. I'm just going to, and I'm just putting streaks. I'm not getting down there and coloring like you want to fill in every teeny tiny little space, because these crayons are going to blend themselves and you really don't need to do that. So what I've put on here is a light gray, and that will go down his back too, because his back is basically black, and it will go on his tail. So let's put some right here. All right, so we've got that, and you can really, in real life I can see it, but I can barely see it. Hold on 1 second. I'm just going to give one more try to see if I can bring the camera focus down. If you've watched me for very long, you know me and this camera have an ongoing argument. Can't do it. Okay, so we have light gray on here. Now, I'm going to just warm it up a little bit, and I mean warm it up, not hot. And for my overlay, I have found out the best thing for me to use is a piece of toilet paper. And I love Scott's because it's so thin. So I have a piece of Scott's here, and all I did is barely warm to the touch, and that's all I need. Now I can switch to a black crayon. And I'm sorry to say I did not hunt out these colors at first because, oh, here's a darker gray. I can use that as well because that's going to go right here, sort of on his neck before I put the black in there. So it's a darker shade of gray. And do not push because you will end up with hard lines. And since the top of his head will have some areas for shadow or light highlights, I'll just leave that. And I'll put a couple streaks of dark gray down here in his feathers. It may end up showing, it may not. I don't care. In my mind, all I'm doing is putting all the colors he needs on. All the colors he needs, I'm putting them on in layers. And I'm just going to heat that up a little bit, because that helps me see what's happening. Is it blending? So let me get my other container of crayons, and I will find black. Bear with me here. You know, after you peel the paper back on your crayons, you can't really tell what they are sometimes. So I just mark them on my desk a little bit to check on the color. So here we have black, and this is a Crazy Art brand of crayon. It's not even really a Crayola, although I like Crayola because there's more pigment in them. Now, my fabric is ever so slightly warm, so I want to go gentle and just apply some color. And do not start rubbing back and forth. Start out with strokes, because you can always go back and put more. You can't take it off. So I've worked down to that little white band he always has around his, and then I'm going to put some black over top of this gray. And even though my gray might not end up showing, guess what it did? It gave me an underlayment. So, and then I'll bring some black crayon down here. The only place I try to be careful is around the edges, but if you do go outside your line, when you put your embroidery on top of it, you can hide that. That is no big deal. And you can see at this point, it is a very rough type of design. Now let's see, I've used this piece of toilet paper twice already, but there's absolutely nothing on it. That thing about soaking the crayon back out again, I would only worry about that if it was going to be in a quilt. Very little of it will come back out. And if it does, then I fold it over, use it again, and then get a new piece. So I like what I have started right here. Now, this little white spot in his, along his neck, I will put some white crayon in that just because I wanted to have the same texture as the rest of the fabric when I start embroidering. And then he's got a little white collar here, so I'll put some there. Now what next? He's got this buffy breast, buffy colored. So it's a matter of finding the right color crayon, and I just happened to pick up this raw sienna. If I put a light coat on, let me test it on my side. If I put a light coat of that on, that could work. Also for some shading, this peach, because he is a blend of peachy and rust, and you can take your artist's liberty and put as many colors in there as you want. So the lightest of these two colors is of course the peach. So I want to start out with that. I'm going to put a whole surface underneath with that because it's the lighter of the two. And then I can go back over. And I'm looking for my little snap knife. Boy, have I found this is handy. So I just make a slit right down the paper, about an inch, and peel that paper back. Otherwise, I was trying to dig it off of there with my fingernail and I found out I had crayon under my fingernail. So now I did have a couple accidents by dropping some crayon shavings, and I had to improvise. All right, here's my lightest shade, peach, for his breasty area, and I am going light. I mean, I myself here can hardly see it. And you always want to make your strokes in the same direction that the feathers would go. It doesn't seem important, but the brain kind of, if any of your lines do end up showing up, your brain says, oh, that's the way the feathers go. You're not consciously thinking that, but it does happen. So I've got a real light layer of that peach on there, but I'm probably not done with that. So I'm going to heat that up very little and put just a little bit more in the places that I know need to stay peach. Now, because my fabric's warm, you can see a lot of crayon came off right away onto the fabric. That's why you never want to push. And we'll just, he does have the semblance of a crease down the middle of his breast. And if you don't want to get this detailed, that is no problem. Just get your color on there, and you can even make it all one shade smooth and then put your detail in as you stitch over top of it. So now I'm getting a new piece of toilet paper. Don't be laughing at me. I am from West Virginia, and there's all kinds of jokes about toilet paper. So I've pressed that in. The fabric is warm, almost too warm for me to want to start with this darker color. But in case it goes wrong, I'm showing you what can go wrong. So because he does have this little area up the middle of his breast, I'm going to just darken that a tiny bit. And see, the crayon is going on there real quick. And I want to shade sort of and decide where my light source is coming from. And I'm telling you, these strokes are so light, you wouldn't think any crayon would come off. And if it wasn't warmed up, it wouldn't. Now down here under where his feet will set, I'll just put a little there. Now, what I learned as I was layering was, because I can't push and rub, the colors aren't blended yet. It just looks like I put color on there. But this is what I learned. After I have the basic colors I want on there, and I would like to have a tinge of a more, this is another brand. This is Crayola brand Peach. Let's see if it does what I want. I want a brighter spot. Just vary your colors. Just vary them. And leave some area without too much color. That automatically gives you highlights. Little heat. Take it off. Now I'm asking myself, okay, I've got everything. I've got this first layer down. Let's go back and put the heavy accent where I want it. And in this case, I want this. His throat, the collar area, I want a little bit more black in that. And I definitely want more on his head. I'm going around the edge, very careful. And don't fill it in too much. Leave some highlights. And you, after you stitch this, you won't believe how good it will look. The thread brings it alive. And you will look like an artist. I'm telling you. It's amazing what it does. A little darker black down here in his wing area. Back. It is his wing that's folded up to the side. And some more black down here on his tail. And I'm not going to focus on that too much. Here's my toilet paper again. Now when you use black or red, you might pull off a little bit of the color on your paper. That's just how it is. Yeah, so once I know it's got something on it, I'm going to wad it up. And me, because of the mess I'm in, I'm just throwing it in the floor. Now, we've got to put something on his beak. I have found out it's better just to put a light, whatever the light or the medium colors are, and then define the beak with your thread. Because it's just too delicate of an area. And that will work good. Actually, maybe I'll put one little, I take my words back, put one little touch of black along the top and the bottom. And that'll be enough, because by the time I embroidery around it and put the beak break line in it, that will be great. So, a new piece of toilet paper. And I will tell you that this little guy is ready to stitch. And after I would stitch him, he will come alive. So, I want you to see him up close. It looks pretty sloppy and unfinished, doesn't it? Leave it that way. Don't overwork it. Now, if you're positive sure you're going to need more color, that's fine. But your first go around, try to always envision him with all the stitches around him, which really will define him. Okay, now on the white area, when you're stitching him, I would put white on white, because even though it's white on white, the texture will grab shadows, and you will put a few shadows in that cheek area, and that will look just perfect. Now, when you're doing a little project like this, if you're a slow stitcher, embroiderer, now is your opportunity to use all the wonderful stitches that you know to really bring him alive. If I was doing him as a little art piece, I would probably use a fly stitch or a feather stitch and come down his breast, because that kind of makes you think feathers. You know, I would come down in rows of fly stitches. All around the edges, I use my stem stitch. If I want to fill in something solid, of course, I use a satin stitch. But I don't like satin stitches really because it leaves too much thread underneath your fabric. So I tend to do short and long stitches without over looping in the back. You can do split stitch, you can do anything you know how to do, or it would be a good opportunity to learn some new ones. All right, so let's talk about this pumpkin for a minute because you're going to see how I would start from the get-go. I would rub some crayons off on my paper to see what color they really are. And in my mind, I know that those pumpkins are very gray blue, a very gray teal blue. So here I have a gray and a teal. And hold on a minute. Just going to see if I can improve the lighting. Oh, I've got a Jimmy rig set up here. Now, which one of these are, oh, this is a silver. So let's see how that works. I don't know, but the gray is the lighter of the two. So I'm just going to do two sections, and all I'm going to do is put some long sweeping streaks, not over every square millimeter of this pumpkin. I'm just getting something down. There you go. And you can see it is streaky. It is not, I'm so sorry about this terrible lighting. My only hope is it comes out better in the video because what I see on my screen really fools me sometimes. Okay, so some silver is down there. I have a teal color in my hand. That's cobalt blue. That is too blue, not the right shade of blue. But what is teal made out of? Now remember, those pumpkins are a gray teal. But what is teal made out of? Blue and green mixed together. So if I don't have the right shade of teal, I can mix my own. So here's a green. It's a yellow green. I could take a chance and put down a real light shade, a smudging. Let's call it a smudging. And see, look, I'm not being, other than to go outside the lines, I'm not caring. I let the crayon work for me and the texture of the fabric. So I put a little bit of that. Now, if you're going to add and mix, do everything at one time. That way you get the same result all over your image. So now, let's warm it up first. This one's clean. Oh, no, wait. Just in case it's not. See how I'm being careful. Let's warm up this pumpkin. And now, let's put a real light, see if I can go light. I always test it first. That's pretty warm. So what that tells me is I've got my iron warmer than I need it. So let it cool just slightly. Now let's start adding some teal. And since this is the stronger or the darker of the color, I want to put it where I want it. And I really want to leave some of that lighter area showing through. Always try that first. If I have to go back and fill it in, no problem. See, it's almost like you're using paints. How many of you have painted? Also, another thought comes to my mind. If you're not an embroiderer or you want a faster process, you can do your image and then free motion machine quilt it. You could do the free motion outlining and stuff. So I love the tint and the tone that's going on these sections. So not too much until I think it through. All right. Now, where the sections of the pumpkin meet, of course you need some shadow down in there, but you need it on the side of the one that's in the back. So I can put more of my teal color there, but then it's going to be really teal. But what will I do? I'll come back over top of it with a darker shade of gray, or I can leave it, and by the time I get it stitched, it'll be fine. Only do as much or as little as you like and you're comfortable with. I like playing with crayons. I mean, that was the only really art supply I had as growing up. So I love crayon. I love coloring. I love color. And I love stitchy. Oh my goodness. I have so many things I like. Now, when you put your shadows in, you have to put some in for definition. Like, let's just talk about these two, where they touch each other. That needs a little bit of a shadow. So what do I have here? I've got one of these off-brand crayons. It's so off-brand it don't even have a name. I'm going to test it. And it says, it doesn't even, oh, it's coming out as if it's a shade of gray. Kind of a purpley gray. And I'm just going to put some of that. Now, that crayon doesn't have much pigment in it, and you might find that to be the case. So let me get, let's see, what are they calling this? This is a light gray. It's called Tumbleweed. It's a Crayola one. Let's put some more gray on this. And I can tell you already it needs some more green, because those pumpkins are a dusty, dirty looking teal. And right now this looks more blue teal than it does green teal. So if you like that, that's great. It's just a little bit bright, and you will want to color your pieces according to where you're going to use them. There's nothing wrong with that right there, because I will define it and tone it down with my threads as I stitch around it. But let's see, where did... All right, so I want to add some more green, but you know, this was kind of an apple green. I'm going to find a muddy green, almost like, this one's called asparagus, and that's more like a mossy green. Now, when you pick up a different color, don't think you have to go over every single area. When you have color variation in your project, that's what makes it interesting. Oh, yes. This is just perfect. Smear it a little bit, and I mean smear. Okay, believe it or not, I like it, because I can imagine what it's going to look like after I stitch around it. Now, I will choose the perfect color, embroidery floss, or some of them I did with pearl cotton. I will choose the perfect color for the outline, because that's what the brain will pick up. Oh my gosh, I love it. And I love the fact that the texture still shows through. I can see variations of color, and in these highlight places, I can see the texture of the fabric. I love that. Looks like a painting. So, let me think now, is that it? Let me go back and look at this, and I'll explain a couple things to you here. I gradiated this squash. I don't know, I saw a picture online, and I blended all my, excuse me, I got the hiccups, blended all my greens with all my golds. And I had to create a lot of my golds myself. So what is gold? Gold is a muddy looking orange, you know. And what is gold made out of? Orange. and yellow and all those. So anything on that side of the color wheel will work. And I even brought down some smudgings of my green crayon into the gold and some of the gold up into the green yellow area. Probably I only used 3 or 4 colors on this pumpkin. I just worked on it until I got it the color I wanted it and with the shading around the bottom. But when I stitched, I thought to myself, these are on the upper edge, they would be in the highlight areas. So when I stitched, like in this row here, I used 3 different colors of thread. You can either do that or not. You don't have to go to that much trouble. But since these will be kind of keepers for me and my samples, I did it the way I knew I could enjoy it. Now the blackbirds, I put a real light layer of gray under everything, and then I started adding my black, and I made sure I did not fill it in solid black. Now, here's something else that I did. I don't even know if you can see it or not, but as I kept adding crayon and ironing, I can see ever so faint a line of the pigment from the crayon kind of bleeding out into the fabric. After I looked at that, I loved it, because if I paint with my acrylics or my ink tints, I have to come out here and put a shadow anyway. So I thought, okay, that's going to serve me quite well. Now, you'll see on this primitive one, here's the one where I got some crayon shavings. I got one crayon shaving in the wrong place and I couldn't get it off. So all I did was make some crayon shavings of all the colors that I've used, and I ironed them right in. And that worked on this primitive because it's primitive. And it kind of anchors the whole image. Makes it feel like it belongs to that piece of fabric. All right, now I'm sure I'll turn this off and I wish I'd showed you something else. I am going to show you one more thing, because I have the 3 patterns I showed you gone up on my Etsy site, but I'm working on a 4th, and I wanted to show you what these things look like in progress. So here's my pattern, and a Canadian goose sitting on the pond with cattails. He's got a banner around his neck, and I'm in the process of embroidering the word welcome. So let me show you how that pattern comes. And you can see here that I have not added a lot of crayon. The water has very little crayon in it, and his breast is nothing but a one light coating of beige. And these are very undefined, but that's what I will define with my stitches. And I've been known, after I put my stitches in, if I feel like I need a little bit more crayon, I'm not opposed to doing that, but I try not to get it on my floss. So here's the pattern for this goose, and you'll see I wrote welcome here, but on the pattern it says autumn. And the pattern comes in 2 pieces, and what you do is line up the registration lines and tape it together. And then if you order, I will leave this blank, and you can fill it in with whatever you want, because I have the word autumn here, and then I did 2 more with the words welcome and hello fall. So you can choose which one of these you want to do, and all you have to do is lay your fabric over top of it and use, you could use a disappearing pin or a micron pin and get your lines on there for your stitching. So that's what it looks like in progress. And for instance, these cattails, they look pretty ho-hum, you know, not very defined, just some small shading, and all light tones, even though I didn't want to get them super dark brown. I wanted them to hold their highlights. But I will put dark brown and dark rust as my outlines, and then if I want to add some texture to it, I'll use my little seed stitches and put some dots in there. Let me show you the seed stitches, some of them. Gotta think which one was it on, which sewing piece had, yeah, okay. Seed stitches are your friend. So let's look at this leaf. I did these leaves in a special way because I wanted them to look really old and dying. And the feature of this leaf is that all the veins are the focal point, which is some blended colors in the background. But as these leaves deteriorate, they start breaking up, turning brown. So I used all my seed stitches to designate those areas that are sort of disintegrating. Now, as far as floss goes, you can use pearl cotton. I did use a lot of pearl cotton on the first one. And so my outlines are quite thick and chunky. And that's what this piece called for, I thought. For me. You might think different. And then if I had any delicate areas or I didn't have the right color pearl, I switched to floss and I used 3 strands. And this is mostly the outlines are 3 strands, and it gives plenty of enough definition. But if I have a smaller area that I'm working that I know 3 strands would make it too crowded, I go down to 2. And then on his feet, the bird feet, that is 1 strand of floss. So it all works out. If you're a stitcher, you'll know exactly what to do. Even if you're not, you want to be, get a simple project and practice. Order one of my kits. It comes with just basic instructions as reminders, and then it'll refer back to this video. Okay? Well, okay, I thank you for watching. We're almost at the hour mark, which is a lot, I know, for a lot of you. But there's Mr. Welcome Goose. Now, I'll mount him as a wall hanging, but if I end up with a nice piece, I'm going to take a picture and have him printed on canvas. Something that my girlfriend can hang outside under her porch rug. So there you have it. Coloring on fabric with crayon. There's many other things you can color on fabric with. You can use your acrylic paints. You can use ink tints. You can use certain alcohols. But I love this because basically it's quick. It's easy to do. It's very systematic, and it gives you a big bang for your buck. All right, thank you for watching, and again, come back and see me next time. This is Suzanne in Ohio on a gorgeous late summer day saying goodbye. Thanks for watching.